Well, good day, everybody. My name is Jason Stella, and I am the host of the Lifetime Training Podcast, and I have a special treat for you today. I have Miss Mel Spooner and Dr. Colin Robertson here to talk to you about COVID-19 and different solutions that can help, trainers, coaches, people that have gotten this, terrible disease and how to deal with it and how to prevent it. So I am excited. It's a hot topic right now. So I'd just like to welcome both of you, Colin, Mel. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
No problem. Well, obviously they're from the UK, as you can tell. And I'd love for you guys to just, start with saying a couple things about yourself, just so the audience knows kind of your background so that they're like, who are these people talking about this?
Sure thing. Colin, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So my name's Colin Robertson, Dr. Col. I'm known as wide and far. My background really started over 25 years ago working in the fitness industry. Moved on from that to become a strength and conditioning coach within elite and professional sport in the UK, and then really developed as a researcher specialising in exercise and nutrition science, predominantly physiology. Currently, I'm a lead researcher in Greater Manchester. I run a gym over here in the UK. We have our own gym where I'm based, and I'm a part of a lot of groups, steering groups with regards to Westminster, Greater Manchester, a lot of county stuff, leading on physical activity, exercise, innovation, and those kind of changes, and collaborate with kind of academics, medics, doctors all over the world.
Awesome. Welcome. Thank you so much. Mel?
I guess I've been in the fitness space for about 15 years, working with brands including Technogym. I was fortunate to be part of the startup team with MyZone, have some awesome adventures with those guys, as well as the early days of the UK office with TRX. Yep. I set my own company 6 years ago, where we've worked with brands including Stage of Cycling, which you guys are familiar with, and then most recently launched this new project called with Carl about 3 months ago.
Awesome. And Mel and I met we were on the one of the advisory boards for the NESM, and we met actually in Arizona here a couple years back when we sat for that advisory board. So it was a great time.
Doesn't seem like 2 years ago.
I know, crazy. Well, thanks again for joining the show. And why don't we kind of jump into, what are you guys seeing in regards to what's different in the club setting right now, and how this thing has impacted, just so many people.
Do you want to go first, Mel?
I think from us here, from a UK perspective, it's hard to tell, because it's still early days. From the relationships that we have with clubs, or the relationship that we've got with some of our regulatory and lobbying bodies here in the UK, like UK Active, what we understand is that consumer confidence, from a surveying and a quantitative perspective, has improved since we're about 6 weeks or so since we were here in the UK. So consumer confidence is changing and improving. So that's a huge positive, but I do think it's still kind of the early stages of the emergence. I guess one key thing, which isn't unique to the UK and being seen everywhere, is clearly during lockdown, a lot of clubs made the pivot to provide a digital model to what they're doing, which for the most part was perhaps on the agenda for a long time, and then this kind of expedited the process.
Exactly, yeah.
But that, so far as what the market is demonstrating from an activity and what's happening, that blended approach is here to stay for sure. And I think a lot of clubs that had done sort of a short-term offering of that are now developing that into a more core part of their business. I would say they're the two biggest things that people are focused on, but also as a slightly, different operation, but also as a business owner, there's a big focus on managing the day-to-day and managing still some of the financial impact, of course, and the fallout of COVID-19. They're probably the biggest three things that my conversations are focused around.
Got it. Colin, anything?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can answer that a little bit differently because I actually own and operate a gym as well. So we're dealing from facing with those clients coming back to us and coming in. So initially there was a level of trepidation. You know, people were concerned, one, about how safe the environment was and what were the rules going to be with regards to face masks, protection, how we were going to change the layout of what we offered and how that was conducted. And as Mel said, really, as the weeks have gone by, that seems to have become a little bit more desensitized and people are gaining a confidence. But something I've seen across the board, and certainly we've experienced firsthand, is there's a different expectation from the people coming, those who are coming back to fitness, and certainly those who are coming for the first time to fitness. And a lot more of the questions now are hinging off, you know, what aspect of this improves health and not just fitness? So that seems to be a much more natural part of the language now, because I genuinely see, and fortunately for me, I have access to the data. You know, this was a shot across the bow to fit people, because fit people thought we're probably immune to this and then found out they weren't. And then if you look at the current statistics around what typically becomes a long hauler and has those longer drawn out symptoms, well, we see a lot of previously fit people making up that group. So across the industry, there's been that initial coming over the concerns of, is it safe to be in a group environment and exercise? Should I change what I'm doing? That's become part of the language. And then the whole kind of, was I doing something wrong before? So I see this kind of threefold approach of people's return to fitness. And I think that's probably a fair reflection of across the board of what people are encountering.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, one of there's just a lot that you guys had said right there. A couple of things I wanted to highlight is just this shift of really the public perception around what clubs are, from being just fitness to really looking at it and growing into health. And maybe the population's getting older. There's a bigger population that's getting older, and, you know, more and more people, or maybe it's, I'm in my mid 40s now, so I'm thinking more in the health and the well-being side of it, as opposed to just being super lean and fit. So this shift of, it's about losing weight for a lot of people, but it's more about, I want to feel better. I want to move better. I just want to live longer and in a better quality of life. But one of the things that you had said that, if we can expand upon a little bit, is the healthy perceiving that they are not going to get it, and then they do get it. And what issues, you know, have you seen that have come across from those particular individuals, and how do we work through that?
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's something that's very much a live topic for us at the moment. Yeah. So first of all, it's demystifying why do healthy people still get infected with COVID-19. Well, COVID-19 relies first and foremost on a poor response from your immune system. So that's the first thing. So I don't want to teach people how to, you know, I don't want to tell people their own business, but COVID-19 as a virus sits upon the cell, sends a message to replicate. That cell destruction then triggers a over response from the immune system, which kills off more stuff. That's what creates the really severe symptoms. So if we categorize now what we would call healthy and a healthy immune response separate from someone who's fit, because you can be really fit but not necessarily be doing sufficient work to bolster that immune response. So it's the fit people, the people who are training most days, training with intensity, training with purpose, regularity, maybe focused on their local marathon, triathlon, whatever it is they do, obstacle race. They're the ones who've had a bit of a culture shock, who've said, hold on, I was eating right, I was training all the time, how has this got me? It's kind of like, well, guys, you know, if there's no respite, that immune system's taking a hit 24/7. So that's where the kind of shock factor, I guess, has come in. And that is what is informing our conversations and the information we're putting out, which is regards to, we've all had a shot across the bow. We can all do things better. Let's be more health-centric, but still work towards those fitness goals. So there is a huge psychological element to this. The people who previously were under the notion they were doing everything right, you know, they were highly engaged in health and fitness, who now have gone, actually, I'm vulnerable to this.
Yeah.
You know, and it's really made them ask different sets of questions. And a good example of how those questions have changed in my experience, because as someone who deals a lot with nutrition, previously a lot of people would approach us and say, what protein should I take? What creatine should I take? What's a pre-workout? Now that has turned on its head, and people are saying to me, what's the best supplement to take to bolster your immune system? What's the best way to look after your cellular health? So that conversation has changed because people have become aware of that level of vulnerability. And I think the opportunity for the health and fitness industry is to get right back on track with health and fitness, rather than fitness and you get a bit of health. Yeah. You know what I mean? I think that's where we're currently sat. I don't know if you think any differently about that, Mel.
I love that.
No, I'd agree entirely. And kind of what surprised, obviously I come at things from a slightly different perspective for Colin. I'm not kind of in amongst a lot of the case studies and papers that he would see. But some of the COVID survivors that we've personally had conversation with and so on, surprised me insofar as that notion and that idea before that it was somebody that maybe didn't have a history of exercise and activity. But a couple of people we've spoken to, just as kind of case examples, one guy, Charlie Peters, kind of world champ Muay Thai fighter, COVID-19, through to 60-year-old Jan Thornton, like super awesome, committed history for exercise history for 40 years, arguably. She's kind of about 24 weeks out of COVID-19 and still experiencing problems. So it's kind of what I would actually say, Cole, that we've probably had more conversations with people with a history of exercise than without, for the most part.
I'd say
our perspective.
Yeah, I'd agree, Mel, from our perspective as kind of working within the fitness and health space. But because of the other side of the roles that I occupy, looking at health across populations and global populations, so looking at the data from North America, United States, Australia, Canada, those kind of things, what we're seeing across the board is that we've got groups of people who are more susceptible to have the worst type of symptoms, the most severe symptoms and the longest lasting symptoms. So no surprise, obesity, type 2 diabetes, cancer, cardiovascular disease, all those comorbidities, no surprise, people who've already got suppressed immune systems, systemic inflammation, they took the hit and they make up the most of the worst cases. Then what we get though is beneath that are this group, this emerging group of what we call the long haulers. And they're the ones who we're talking about rarely here. They're the ones who were caught off guard. They're the ones who thought, no, I'm doing my recommended physical activity every day. I'm going to the gym. I'm doing all these things. So how come it got me? And how come in the wake of having had it, am I being left with this long tail of symptoms? And that is what brings us right back down to that point again, is that if we stop and we take stock of what we were doing, what our behaviors were really focused on, how much of that can we quantifiably say was about making an improvement, and how much of it was actually breaking down systems? Because, Jake, people who love to exercise, they love to exercise hard. So they go hard all the time. And when we're saying to people, well, actually, you rest and recovery is where it's at. That's where we improve. And then you get no pain, no gain, go hard or go home. And that's not the case. So this is really what's opened the door to reconsidering that and changing the way people engage with and experience exercise. So I think there's been massive learning across multiple types of populations. One of them has been a new value attached to being health-centric amongst people who previously weren't. And then there's a new value attached to those health messages from people who thought they were doing the right thing.
Yeah. That's awesome. And one of the hardest things, we've seen, and I've had it here in the States, is that, this person was healthy and they had no symptoms and they passed away. And, it's one of those things where if anything, going to the doctor for more regular checkups, but then also understanding, what can I look at? Like, do you know of, you mentioned cellular health and inflammation. because sometimes doctors don't look at that, so what do you know of are things that the member or the person can go and actually do? Do you know of any assessments or anything like that will show where they actually are? Because just because they haven't been to the doctor and they're not taking any meds doesn't necessarily mean that things are going right. And, that's on the one extreme of people that aren't really working out. And then there's the other extreme, like you were talking about, is the people that just go all out, don't give themselves the chance to recover, which is the most important part of getting better and improving. And they're just go 100% all the time. And then their immune system drops due to overtraining. So kind of the question really is, what do you guys have you seen as far as assessments, whether it's a doctor or even an integrated medicine doctor or just hormone testing that you can get online now, anything that you know of that can help them figure out where do I sit now?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and it's really kind of it's kind of provocative right at this moment, I guess, because it's, people, there are industries who like to take advantage of situations like this. Let's put it that way. And I don't want to encourage people to now feel that they go and need to become a lab rat and get tested for everything, because that's largely unnecessary. I think it's always good practice to make sure that we're covering the basics, if not every year, every 18 months, and we are getting a blood sugar profile. We're seeing where we're at with regards to our insulin response, because there's been a lot of mixed messages around insulin behavior and insulin sensitivity. And because there's been a lot of mixed messages and people have challenged it and said, no, it's just about calories in, calories out, people have dismissed it. But in reality, we know 101, the fact is that how our insulin response is and levels of insulin determine not only cognitive factors, but certainly systemic inflammation factors, and also how the cell is essentially respirating and being able to get sufficient downtime to move nutrients on and get fat out of the system. So there's a key thing. I recommend that to everyone. And then the second part of that is, if you're going to go to that extent, it's always worth having a look at a blood lipid profile to see what your ratios are like with regards to your omegas, because they give you a clear insight as to the integrity of your cell.
And you're saying the omega 6s and 3s and 9s.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So see where you're at on a ratio with that, because that tells you loud and clear where, if you're not right at a cellular level, you can't be right at a gross anatomical level. But approach with caution. There are simpler things, how things you can measure yourself at home. What's your resting heart rate like? What's your heart rate range? How much does that change when you exercise or engage in physical activity? Take simple measures yourself and don't become obsessed. Maybe measure it once a fortnight, once every 2 weeks, once a month, just to see if you feel that you're under a level of stress or you're not feeling great. That's a good time to check something like heart rate and see, well, how does that compare to times when I feel well? But then if you're going to go and get some investigative measures, I personally am a strong advocate of checking those two, looking at your blood sugar response for your insulin and your blood lipid profile, because they're the early warning signs. They're both the early warning signs for any kind of chronic disease. And in instances like this, they give us an indication with regards to how will our body react and respond if it encounters this virus. Because if our inflammation is low, if our systemic inflammation is low and under control, and our cellular integrity looks good, then if we do contract COVID, we should expect to deal with it rather comfortably.
Got it. So you mentioned about some of these athletes and some of these people who are technically fit that have got it. What have been some of those long-term effects and symptoms that they're still dealing with, and how severe are they if the longer they last?
Well, you've just hit the nail on the head there, Jason. So the longer they last, then typically the longer you have your symptoms for, then typically, I don't like using this term, and anyone who's medical will hate me for using this term, but typically the more damage or alteration to the structures that will have taken place. So that's a key bit. So we know there's more to repair the longer that you've been symptomatic for. Fit people the fitter people, common things that they are experiencing are chronic fatigue, debilitating levels of chronic fatigue. So things that they could previously do quite comfortably, wiping them out, taking all their effort, trying to re-engage with exercise at quite a low level and finding that takes a good 2 days to recover from. They're not able to move on as they were before. We're getting across the globe really, but certainly from the US and from the UK, we're seeing this emerging pattern of neurological issues. So neurological discomfort and firing, loss of sensation that is going on. So that's becoming quite a common factor amongst previously fit people. And then we're getting, a step beyond that is we're looking at some cardiovascular issues as well. So we're seeing elevated resting heart rate. We are seeing a shorter heart rate range. So the higher resting heart rate, and when they exercise, either suppressed or over a simple thing, just their heart rate shooting through the roof. So we are seeing those cardiovascular changes. But what we know is when at the start of the COVID pandemic, certainly in the West, it was assumed that the virus was attracted to the respiratory tissue and was going straight for the alveoli and going for the lung. But what the more recent evidence tells us that it can attack the hemoglobin within the blood. It can go straight to cardiac tissue. It can have an impact on vital organ response. So assume nothing. Just because you've not had any respiratory issues doesn't mean you haven't dealt with the virus in some way. And my advice to everyone is that if you have any reason to suspect that you have experienced COVID-19, take the long route out. Be really moderate, take your time, build up those tolerances, because what we need to do in real terms is recover the system and repair the system, because it is invoking changes, I won't say damage, at a cellular level. So we need to repair that before we start to extend that.
Got it. And have you found that there's, you mentioned chronic fatigue, but are there the smaller systems, the dry cough, are there certain things like that you can inform people on that could be symptoms? Because some people might just say, oh, I'm okay, I don't have it. But then, these are the things that, typically you've seen most common as far as
that's a really interesting point, that actually, because it's a common sign to consider if you've got it. So we've told people about the dry cough, non-productive cough, and those kind of issues, loss of sense of smell and taste. But what we are seeing across the globe is that in the wake of it, so you've had the acute phase and you've actually gone past what you might call the point of infection, is that people are left with this tiny irritating little bit of a cough, and not something that is physically troublesome, but just persistent. Yeah. Likewise, low level cold-like symptoms. So just a little bit of a runny nose. They might think it's a kind of seasonal hay fever kind of feeling. Little bit more susceptibility to migraine that they didn't have before. So you're right. There's another emerging group who are showing just these irritating, never enough to stop you. Yeah. You'd probably be quite happy to go to work, but just dragging on a little bit. And if, I would say to people, given where we're at and what we understand about it, is if you have any reason to believe that you have had it, act accordingly. Yeah. And start to work on the repair side of it.
Well, and so many people, I've heard, and, again, they may or may not have it. It's allergies. So they'll throw it on the allergies. I'm coughing because of allergies. And, here in the desert, obviously there's dust everywhere, and we're in the monsoon season, in here. And so there's people, breathing in dust, and, who knows what, is that it, or is it something else? So that's fantastic. I want to just kind of segue into this, because some people might be asking, obviously, oh my God, very intelligent, but some of the things that you're working actually with the World Health Organization on some things and some research. Would you mind just going into kind of what you're doing with them and, what you found there?
Yeah, so currently we've got a project that I'm working with Dr. Mick Malloy, actually, who was previously at Harvard out with you guys, and he's back over in Ireland now. We're working with the World Health Organization. The project that we're working on, because my kind of research background was more environmental physiology. So what we're looking at are droplets, so airborne droplets. And we're looking at it in the context of how far will they travel and remain kind of active, dynamic in an exercise condition. Believe it or not, we're looking at it with regards to if you're in a stadium and you're watching your favorite team, you know, basketball, football, whatever it is, and you're shouting, well, how far does that, you know, project? And for how long can someone who's got the virus, how long can that be active in the air for? So we're starting to measure that. So we're having to look at droplet density, how far it can travel for, what's the likelihood of its infection rate, all these things really, so we can better inform certainly the health and fitness industry with regards to physical distancing and space, and what needs to be done with regards to ventilation, how we can manage that. A part of it feeds into kind of protective kit moving forward. Do we need to have more than the face mask? Is there something we need to plan for in the long term? Because it's important to recognize, and I'm guessing most people are on board with this now, but COVID won't be gone by Christmas. You know, we're going to live with COVID for a couple of years, and that's the acute phase. That's the short term. You know, we have to adjust a lot of how we work as societies in the much longer term in order for us to deal with this effectively. So the project we're working on is really, how can we get people back doing what they love? How can we make that as safe as possible? And how can we, you know, change that and relax that as things move forward and we've got a better control over it? So that's a key part of the research that we're on now. And it's, you know, we're having to contrive conditions to collect that kind of data, as well as going back to the long established research base with regards to these kind of things. The difference in, you know, even the difference in salivary sampling produced, because you're probably aware of this, but your saliva changes in density and texture when you're exercising versus when you're not exercising. You know, if you're at your stadium and you're having a beer and you're shouting because someone just created a foul, well, that has a different density and projectile rate. Wow. So, yeah, so there's a lot to figure out, but hopefully these are the kind of projects that it's kind of unlocking society and getting people back to living their lives. So it's valuable stuff. It's an interesting project to be a part of.
Well, you know, with that, there's, you know, out here, there's been, you know, every state's different in this, you know, in the United States of, you know, what is allowed, what's not, who's opening, who's not. There's some that are just starting to open up now, some that have been open for several months. And we haven't, you know, at least at our facilities, we have not seen a huge amount of really spread at all. I haven't heard much yet at all, a little bit maybe here and there. But those numbers I don't have, you know, off the top of my head. I just know that I haven't heard that there's a lot of it going down or clubs shutting down due to it. How is that in the UK? Any different? And, you know, what are your thoughts just around how in the States it's, you know, I don't want to make this political, but there's, you know, there's always the political background of the governor allowing this to be open or not, and what side they're on. But take that apart. You know, what do you feel and what have you seen, and what is the World Health saying potentially, if you can speak to that, around the risk of clubs in the spread?
Do you want to? I'm going to allow you to lead the charge on that one, Mel, because you'll probably have a far more reasoned response than me.
I was actually going to put that one on you. I suppose in a direct response to the question, same here, Jace, really. Like, there's been no real evidence or any big statements or anything similar that suggests the opening of gyms has changed things at all. Yeah. And also, I think as well, because the environment that the gym presents itself, and in terms of the fact that everyone who operates a gym has been exceptionally vigilant from a hygiene and from a guideline and an operational perspective, exceptionally vigilant. Yeah. So I think it's kind of the process and the care within which clubs has reopened has potentially aided that. But we don't know, because we don't have like the test on the other side where those changes didn't make. But there's been no statements or there's been no information to the contrary, same as there has been there.
Yeah, and a lot of it is said there's been a lot of gyms that have been open for quite a while now, and there hasn't been big issues. So the follow-up question is masks, and your thought, Doc, on with regards to wearing masks. In the States, some clubs are requiring masks to be worn even while exercising, and then others are a little bit looser. Anything that you can give on risks and issues potentially, or even benefits of wearing the mask, and in one, what it can do to their health, and are there risks and things that they need to understand, and then two, does it help or not?
Wow, that's a huge question. So I'll break that down into a few parts. So first of all, so I'm not representative of this statement, but I do happen to know that the World Health Organization's statement with regards to the wearing of masks in exercise spaces is that they think you shouldn't, because it's more of a hindrance than it is a help, so long as measures are firmly in place with regards to the physical distancing and the sanitation of the kit and equipment that's available to the individual. So I would actually completely agree with that. I think that when you're exercising, the mask would be more uncomfortable. It's not actually, I know there's a lot of mythology at the moment about like affecting your blood, your oxygen saturation. It doesn't do that, but it's a physical barrier. It's uncomfortable, causes irritation. And if you are physically distancing, you're preserving that at least 1 meter square, and you're focused on your exercise, and that's been sanitized well, and all that duty of care has been delivered and managed, then I think you are at such low risk, you've got nothing really to be unduly concerned about. Now, the other question, which Mel and I have discussed a few times, and we've certainly discussed this in the gym that we run, is the coach, the instructor wearing a mask. If they're not actually exercising, but they are guiding exercise, should they wear a mask? My take on that would be that, yes, wherever possible, I would encourage that, so long as it's not a barrier to communication. So it could be that it's better for the coach to wear a face shield so that they can still communicate effectively, they can be seen, but there is a level of barrier. Because in that instance, there's no need for them to be physically engaged at any level of intensity. So it's not a barrier to regards to what they're going to do, but other people around them are breathing and exhaling, and it's just a measure of reassurance for themselves. But, going back to Mel's point, in the UK, so we had a bit of a two-phased response. The first thing the government over here did in their wisdom was tell people they could go back to the pub, and they went back to the pub. Whoa, they went, when they unlocked the pubs, they made a charge for it. And then about a week later, unsurprisingly, we had a huge spike in number of cases and in mortalities. About 2 weeks after the pubs, I think it was, Mel, they said the fitness industry could reopen. The fitness industry reopened. There was no spike, no measurable increase in mortality, no sensation, no change. So I think it's fair to assume and say that the conditions, the environmental conditions, are decidedly different. Likewise, the environmental conditions are decidedly different than if you are shopping in a mall and you're surrounded by hundreds, if not thousands of people in a air-conditioned controlled environment, which is recirculating air. In those instances, 100% wear your face mask. It's a barrier and a level of protection for yourself, and it's a barrier and a level of protection for other people. And as we know, one person wearing it brings about 35% improved protection. 2 people wearing it brings about 90% improved protection.
Oh, I've never heard that one. What?
Yeah. So
how do we state that, if you don't mind?
Yeah. So if it's just you with your mask on,
yep,
and you're surrounded by people, that's around about 35% increased protection, of a barrier. But if the people around you've got it on, then you're around about 90% protected.
Oh, wow.
And then people say, well, that's not 100%. No, but 90% is pretty
exactly.
good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
If I said, listen, I've got £1 million to give away, but I'll only give you 90%, very few people go, oh, no, I'm not interested. If
it's the person who wins the lotto and says, I got to pay taxes. Oh, no.
Yeah, what a hardship. Yeah. So 90% is pretty good, isn't it? So that's where it works best, is if we buy in. And further to your comment, greater minds than mine have made this comment. We cannot separate politics from society. Politics is an inherent part of society. And I think we're right to question and challenge some of the inconsistencies in how things are being released and the terms upon which they're being released. And to me, my concern is that if we want people to learn from this and have a new energy about focusing on health and engaging in physical activity and exercise to improve those parameters, then we've got to get behind support and how that industry supports more people. We have to unlock it. We have to encourage people to engage. We have to encourage people to find that experience and expertise within their communities and therefore improve circumstances across the board. And we have to be careful with our messaging, because a pub, a bar could not be any more different to an exercise environment.
Well,
and
it brings 2 points up. Is one, hopefully the world understands, and the politics, if you want to call it that we are and can be essential, that, this is something that needs and can help. And, obviously, I don't know the stats. I don't know if you have the stats on, the obesity, and if you're obese and how much more at risk you are of all diseases, let alone this one, especially in the States, and how bad that is. So there's that aspect of it. And then, there's that other aspect of, with regard to the mask, if there's any advice that you can give, because in certain states here, they have to wear a mask and we have to have them on, while they're working out. Otherwise we can get shut down. So, can you give any advice, with wearing the mask, what risks there are, in how they should maybe adjust their volume and intensity, different things as they go on. But, and then, in the back of my mind at the same time, I've seen a lot of people wearing masks many years ago because they weren't at elevation and they're going to go do something at elevation. So it was okay to wear the mask then, but now people are freaking out about it now. So anything you can add there?
It's like the minute you tell someone they can or can't do something, they want to do the opposite. The minute you tell them it's a rule. So that's just human response, isn't it? So let's get real. First of all, so those masks that people were wearing with regards to bringing about a change in some level of fitness parameter, and they got really falsely regarded as acclimation masks, and it represented being at altitude. It doesn't. What it does do is it works the respiratory muscles, because you're making drawing oxygen in a more demanding task, because you've presented a full-on barrier. So intercostal muscles, connective tissue, that's getting a much bigger workout, and there can be benefits to that. So I wouldn't entirely dismiss it, but you've got to know why you're doing it. You're certainly not going to get ready for Everest by wearing one of these masks, and doing a Tabata session. Yeah. So there's that part of it. I would say, if you're wearing one of these cloth masks or a clinical mask with regards to, a barrier with regards to possible infection, it's going to get damp and it's going to get more wet as you increase intensity, just because of the saturation of your breath. And that's going to become, again, that more kind of a physical barrier. And also, the whole point of respiration is to get shut of that expelled air. So I would say, exercise anywhere up to moderate with the mask on, and save the higher intensity work to either an opportunity you might have on your own, training at home or in the outdoors, where you can go at a much greater intensity and make that work happen. But in a group environment, in an enclosed environment, anything up to moderate, I think, is reasonable if you have to wear a mask. Got it. Beyond that, if you're really going to start to burden that mask with moisture and it's going to start to become a physical barrier, then that's actually working against you. So just consider it on those terms, really, and save. I'm a huge champion anyway of people training smart all the time and hard some of the time. So those full-on intense sessions, maybe that's where you stick to the work when you can do it on your own and do the rest of your work in the community space.
One last question there, and then I want to dive into, the education that you guys have developed to, help assist coaches and the population to be able to work through this and with this. But, those that do, again, have to wear that mask, have you found anything with regards to cleaning them? Obviously, is there certain things that that we need to make sure that we're using when we're cleaning them? Or if you just throw them in the washing machine, most of the detergents will do its job?
Most detergents, so if you've got a cloth face covering, standard cloth face covering that doesn't have filters, then most detergents are going to be good enough. Because remember, COVID itself, soap actually breaks it down and destroys it. So the nature of the virus, the airborne virus itself, it can't handle soap whatsoever. It breaks down that outer level, and then the virus becomes exposed and it dies. So soap is plenty good enough. So putting that in the washing machine, 30 degrees, making sure that it's cleaned thoroughly is good. I would recommend that wherever possible, you have a cloth mask that has the filters as well, because then you can replace those filters on a daily basis. Once you've gone through them, clean the mask and go back through. So I would encourage those, particularly if you're someone who's relying on a face mask a lot, as in going to work, going about your normal business. But yeah, I mean, soap. So who knew the world had to be taught about washing the hands?
Cleaning their hands.
Isn't it? You know what I mean? Yeah, it's bizarre. The whole world's going, really? We need to wash our hands after we've done stuff? But yeah.
It's kind of like retraining kids all over again, right? It's like
people in the bathroom go, after I've done that, wash my hands again, a bit of soap. So yeah, good cleanliness. And the reason being in this instance, it's not just about, good hygiene, which is essential anyway. It literally destroys the virus. So if it's in contact with your hands, skin, you are destroying it by washing your hands. Awesome. So yeah, that's the best way to manage it.
Got it. So to kind of shift gears a little bit, and God, that was fantastic just to go through that. Some of it may have been repetitive, but just to have this is fantastic. So thank you so much. With the coaches in the industry, obviously there's a lot of concern. There's the consumer confidence of people not coming back. There's people that have gotten it and maybe they don't know how to work with it and what to look for and how to program and different things like that. So, I know that you guys have went long and hard to get your courses out, but would you mind just kind of explaining, you mentioned 2 different key groups that you're finding that the coaches have to work with. What are those groups, and can you kind of expand upon that with regard to, what are 1 or 2 tips that they should know? And then obviously if they, go through the courses, they're going to get a lot more information.
Yeah. Do you want to go, Mel? Do you want to have a chat?
I'll give you a bit of the backstory then, and then you can go through some takeaways for the guys, yeah? Yeah. One thing in relation to your last point, Jace, as well, around the role of clubs during COVID and how, like Cole was saying, how that's perceived here, i.e. pubs went crazy and gyms were kind of one of the last things that was released. One thing that's a big part of what we're working on now, but this kind of, as crazy as it might sound, this wasn't in the early makings of what we were doing, but definitely that's evident in the role of clubs. Yep. Is clubs, wherever they are, UK, US, Asia, Australia, etc., they represent a ready-made infrastructure of facilities and skilled professionals that already exists, is already accessible by everybody. And I think there's enough, we obviously recognise here on this call, and likely everybody listening recognises on this call, that whilst potentially some of our facilities were the last to open, ironically, these are the facilities that are going to take the pressure off the health service and the pressure off doctors and hospitals and provide the next level of care for the individuals that are coming through. Like Carl said, the long haulers, for example, those guys who we've spoken to that may have been in and out of hospital with cardiac problems, neurological problems, stroke scares, and so on, at some point when they're released from their primary care, to your point earlier, when do they go back to exercise? And when they go back to exercise, what's the right level of physical activity, as Cole said, so that they can manage it correctly from once they start to return? And that's where we see the role of the club and the role of the coach stepping in and aiding in a way that we've always been able to do. But now, hopefully, this provides an opportunity to really illustrate and showcase what we're capable of as an industry. And as I say, that's something we've known for a long time, but I feel like we've got a bit of a spotlight opportunity here to demonstrate that to everybody else. Do you agree, Carl? Anything else you want to add to that?
Absolutely. I mean, essentially, Jason, as far as we're concerned, there are three groups. So there are those people who've, for whatever reason, whatever their background is, have had COVID-19. So need to make good on that situation. The second group are maybe the people who have the comorbidities, higher on risk, haven't had it yet, or maybe never will, hopefully, but have recognized that owning their own health and taking accountability for changes they can make is important. And this has raised their awareness of that because they felt vulnerable through it, and they want to consult with people who can support them through that journey. And the third group are people who have been previously exercising and engaging a lot, but because of limitations, restricted access through lockdown, have tried to persist, mainly worked independently or with some online support, but now want to get back to how they were before. So really it's about, with that group, it's realigning their compass and not looking backwards, but looking forwards and saying, here's where I am now. It's great to know how fit you were in the past, but let's realign that now and start to move forward towards achieving new levels of fitness, not this kind of crazy idea that people have that they can get back a level of fitness. You know, you've got to move. It's like money. Once you've spent it, it's gone. You've got to go and earn more money. So your fitness is gone, go and get fit again. So it's managing those people. But with those two more vulnerable groups, what we want to do really is give the PTs and coaches a confidence through understanding the language and really what's happened from a mechanistic point of view, what that person's dealing with, and really getting right back to what we can do like no other industry on the planet, is help people to manage their lifestyle in a better way. Because, you know, if you exercise for 30 minutes or an hour a day, big deal, that's 2 or 4% of your day. You're not going to offset 96% of a day of being a couch potato and not doing anything just because you rock up to the gym and have a go for half an hour. Yeah. So it's about becoming, you know, guidance supporters for increasing their physical activity, their movement, their lifestyle choices, nutrition choices, and really facilitating that from a success-based, you know, not showing people what they can't do, but empowering people to be successful. Because the reality is, you know, over here in the UK, we have the National Health Service. It's the worst named thing in the world. It's the National Sickness Service, because you only go there when you're sick. Yep. And it's, you've got an equivalent in the States, you know, sure. That's to patch it up, make good. Health comes through our profession, and we need to take ownership of that now and lead the way for these people, because we've got an increased amount of vulnerable people within our communities that need our skills and expertise. So what we want to do is get right behind those coaches and give them a confidence in understanding the situation on those three terms, and giving them clear-cut tactics and ways to guide that through, so that more people are successful in making COVID-19 and the concerns about it or their limitations because of it massively a part of their past. Yeah. That's really what the three programs.
And you said it too, is that there's the term health. You know, again, some people might just focus it on exercise, or might just focus it on nutrition, or might just focus it on mental health or social well-being. At the end of the day, health is all those things. And, you know, how do we as coaches expand our toolbox to be able to deal and work within the means that we can within our scope to be able to help these people? Because I would say the best workout, the best nutrition plan doesn't mean anything if we can't get them to do it. So there's the behavioral side of it, all of those things. And the most successful coaches, the ones that have been around for years and years and years, are forming under each one of those pillars. You know, because the mental health side of this whole thing, I think that's the thing that we don't even know the impact of what's happening and what is going to come into the future. You know?
Absolutely. You know, there's a new sense of vulnerability for people who thought they were robust. There's been huge changes to people's personal circumstances, their community perspective, their political perspective, because of the way the world and then individual governments have reacted, and the ripple effect of that. If ever there was a time that was ripe for people to be struggling a bit from a mental health point of view, this is it. This is the one that's come to our generation. So when that person shows up and says, I've got my hand up here, I want some help and support on improving, if we're not appreciative of that. And more than that, recognizing how that features in how we're going to behave and respond, then we will have zero success. The reason why most people in the world, certainly in the States and in the UK, the reason why most of our population don't engage in exercise and physical activity is because we've had our mantra and we've told people that, and most people have said, actually, I don't like the look of that. I think it looks too tough. That's not for me. Thanks all the same. What did we do? We kept banging the same drum for 30 years, going, no, this is what you need to do. I think now's the opportunity for us to recognize we've got to meet people on their terms.
For sure.
And we've got to, we've got to become enablers, social enablers, as well as physical and health enablers. And let's get right to it. As a professional, as someone who's looking on building the sustainability of their business, this is our biggest population. These are the people who not just want us, but absolutely need us. So we've got to not turn our back to it. We've got to see the opportunity for what it is and get involved and do what I would imagine will be some of the most rewarding work we ever get to do in our careers.
Love it. And that segues right, into, again, sharpening the saw, however you want to call it, the building those skills. So you guys have created, really the only that I know of course that dives into how to deal with COVID. Can you, Mel or Doc, whichever, just dive into kind of an overview of, how that course flows, the length of it, what they can expect, and, obviously will expand their business opportunities to bring back, people that might have been feared or maybe they haven't. So, I'd love for the audience to understand what's going on there.
Yeah, sure. So Cole mentioned those three key groups there prior, and they're the people that we're expecting to come through the door. And as Cole said, we want people to be able to confidently welcome those scenarios in. So the three programs follow those audiences in essence. So Rebuild is designed to help coaches and trainers to deal with people who are coming back to activity from COVID.
Okay. So they were diagnosed, they had it, and now they're good to go. And now we're getting them back in, and this is how we work with those people.
Yeah. Or at least they're asking the question of when, how. In the UK, just kind of by way of example, we already know that people are going to local facilities who have experienced COVID and who are asking the questions. Yeah. So that's what Rebuild focuses on. Rebound focuses on, as Cole said, those guys that have been on lockdown maybe 5-6 months, may have been living with one dumbbell. Prior to that, they may have been smashing the gym up 5 times a week. So they're going to come back and want to get back into the shape they were in before. But your guys are going to know that it's not as straightforward as that. So with Rebound, Cole's background, of course, is not only within the clinical world, but also heavily within elite sport. So with Cole and with a ton of other brands and experts and subject matter pros that you guys will be familiar with as well, we wanted to take their knowledge and expertise and practice and create a 2020 look at what a transformation looks like. So new practices and new strategies to take someone to a new level of fitness, because at a time when potentially trainers and coaches, their clients may be kind of in two minds about how much to invest in personal training at the minute because of the crisis that everybody's been through. So it's about trying to present value in a different way that may not have been presented in that way prior. Yeah. And then, as Cole explained, those vulnerable guys, I know Cole's seen some stats and data on this. We know that there are groups of people who have been shielded during this time that's given them kind of second thoughts, and they, in the event of a second time or just period, they want to improve upon their health, their go-to is going to be the gym space. And, if it's a female in her mid-40s and she's never really done exercise since school, and we know all this, obviously, and those sort of people going into the space for the first time, but carrying with them a type of cancer or diabetes or a real complex scenario, it's about how to begin with that person and start to tailor those conversations so that if we're presented with that whole new type of audience that we may have arguably not necessarily been wholly confident to handle before, we can perhaps open up new conversations in a different way, or once we're there, start to understand how best to signpost it into other routes and bring in other experts and practitioners to help us to support that person down the path in that regard.
Yeah, so just to clarify, so the rebuild program is how to work with people who got COVID-19. The rebound program is more based around people who have been sedentary, they haven't done much, maybe they used to work out and they haven't been able to work out now. They may have some other pre-existing conditions, whether it's diabetes or things like that. So that will help teach them how to work with those people. But those people potentially did not have COVID-19, or am I wrong there?
So
no, you're correct. Sorry, I've confused things. So rebuild is COVID people.
Yeah.
Rebound is the group that's been on lockdown but have a previous history of exercise. The vulnerable groups, that's fortitude.
Okay.
So that will teach them that. So they're the 3 course titles.
So then fortitude is the people who they haven't had COVID, but they have other pre-existing conditions, and they're like, okay, I got to get rid of this now. I'm a little bit more aware of how important my health is, and I need to limit this. And this teaches trainers how to work with those different people.
Yeah. And with that group, it's important to notice, because some of the response I've had for 20 plus years is that, yes, you can't cure cancer with exercise. You can't solely cure cardiovascular disease with exercise. However, no matter what chronic disease you have, you can improve it with exercise and nutrition and lifestyle choices. You can improve them. And some of them, we're part of a huge project in the UK. You can literally reverse your type 2 diabetes diagnosis by getting this right. You can go from being type 2 diabetic on medication to no meds and no longer. So the impact and the potential impact of it is massive. So it's not always about curing. It's always about dramatically improving. And that's really, so that fortitude is about placing people in a better place with regards to their health prospects.
Got it. We lost Mel. The impacts of technology. Oh, let's get her. She's back in. Perfect. Wait, let me let her in. She come in. Oh, perfect. There you are. You there, Mel? We lost you for a second. All right, you're good. You're good.
Glitch.
No, you're good. So, so we talked about the 3 programs. Is it bundled all together? Are they 3 individual programs? Tell us, a little bit about that. And then obviously we'll put the websites and all the information into the screen so that people can have access to it as well.
Got you. So 3 separate programs. It's all delivered online. The structure for all 3 is the same.
Okay.
So we'll open each program up where we talk about the concepts of what we're dealing with. So for COVID, we'll talk about the reality of COVID, the structural changes it invokes, etc. And then in each instance, we'll focus on the what we're dealing with and how to approach it, why to approach it in that way. And then we'll get stuck into how to deliver assessments, analysis of those assessments, programming thereafter, exercise prescription thereafter, and so on. Rebuild and fortitude, they have an assessment that comes with those, but rebound is more of a continuous learning piece of a program that you could, as a coach or a trainer, you could dip in and out of. What's very cool, and we've really loved and we're very grateful for too, is we've got a ton of cameos in all 3 programs.
Yep.
So for example, in Rebuild, which focuses on COVID, we've got cameos from people who have had COVID. In Fortitude, we've got cameos from people who have had chronic fatigue, who are living with cancer, and so on. So that the guys can see like a full kind of 360 approach of how exercise can really affect and impact the lives of some of these guys. But equally, we've got cameos in there from Exos, and we've got content that we've got in there from Precision Nutrition. We've got some incredible anecdotal pieces, but also some lectures, for want of a better word, from S&C coaches who've handled world sport and Olympic athletes, through to Mick, who Cole referred to below. Mick comes in and talks about the disaster emergency medicine side of of COVID. One thing that we're very much about as individuals and as a company, and we've always been very conscious of, is kind of it never to be this one-dimensional approach. So we wanted to make sure that we spoke to as many clubs, we spoke, of course, to as many clubs and trainers and other experts to provide like a well-rounded picture of each of those circumstances and kind of widen the opportunity to hear from other audiences that the guys may necessarily not always be able to access.
That's awesome. Well, one last thing I wanted to say too to all the lifetime trainers out there is, they've been, you guys have been, let us offer a discount on the services for a period of time if you're a lifetime trainer after you watch this and once we launch it. So I can't thank you guys enough for that. And really, I can't thank you enough. This was fantastic. I've learned a ton. I think this is going to go really well. But anything else that you guys want to add or anything that we may have missed, at the end here?
No, not at all. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for the opportunity. It's great. It's really good to chat and actually hear, questions from a different perspective. It's really good because it makes us consider things in a different light as well. So that's been, it's been a ton of help for us as well. So no, really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us, Jace. I think what's interesting, as Cole says there, with questions, we've certainly noticed when we've done calls of any kind, and particularly with coaches directly and stuff themselves, there's a lot of common questions around masks, often around supplementation, kind of proximity to working with individuals. So super grateful because it helps to inform us as to maybe additional pieces that we need to put into some of the programs and the courses so that the guys are we're able to answer as many questions from the get-go as we can for everybody.
Yeah, perfect. Well, who knows, after this goes out, we might run this back again with some more stuff too, but I really appreciate your time and thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks.